My name is Oliver Northcott, and I was born in Louisbourg, Newfoundland, in a town that got a gun by my father and his people on the south side. And we lived there for a short time. And then we came across on the north side of the bay. I was born in 1912, and I joke about that because they told me the church burned down. They lost the records. However, we did find the records, and it turns out to be that it was 1912. Of course, we didn't have enough eating-wise, enough in the spare. We had to share our food together. Fish, and when you asked for fish, you asked for codfish. That was the only kind of fish that the Newfoundlanders knew existed. There were plenty of other fish out there, but that's the only one they would take. Fish and salmon, when you refer to fish. Fish was always a daily meal. Meat, sometimes, we may have a pig, and wait for somebody to kill the pig. We had that. And now and then we'd have maybe a hen running around. Our main meal, I spoke to this morning about it, was fish and brews. Fish, the brews, it was a hardtack. And you soaked it in water, and it rose about 3 times its size. Hardtack, hard bread, made primarily of flour and water, but it would last for years. And then you brought that to a boil. You brought your fish to a boil, had some potatoes, throw it together, get fat pork, put them up into small squares, and that was usually an evening meal, Sunday morning meal. Everybody had fish and brews. I went to a one-room schoolhouse. My father, in my early days, fished in the Labrador, and his 2 brothers fished in the Labrador, and their schooner was called the Three Brothers. So he would go away. They would go away in May, get their provisions from some community where a merchant outfitted them, and then come back in the fall of the year, sell their fish to the merchants, paying for the supplies they were given, and hope that they would get enough food to last throughout the winter, supplies throughout the winter. And salmon and fish was about $2 a cattle. Was that 112 pounds? Less. Salmon was 5 cents a pound. Is what they sold. And then in the wintertime in Newfoundland, the thing, fishing was their life. Fishing, the livelihood. It doesn't happen anymore. It's all gone. And the next was the lumber. Going into the woods and cutting pulpwood, so on. We were nine children, 9 boys, all boys. My father died when I was about 12. Before that, there was one that, before I was born, died as a child, with a child's disease for which, there was no doctor. Another boy was drowned. His name was Thomas, and he had gone off to work. He'd taken the train and gone off to work. As memory serves me, he had a day off, and they went out with his cousin on the Exploits River, and their canoe turned over. He couldn't swim. His cousin got ashore because the dog came out and helped him. I remember when our only means of communicating was by telegraph, and my mother had a telegram, and this was a telegram that said Tom was drowned. I remember the way in which she took that. She said, after, I never want to see another telegram again. Carried on. And then she lost another son, but he had gone way in the Labrador, during the Depression, seeing if he could capture some animals, furs, and my memory, what I have, is he died of meningitis, no doctors around, and so on. And another brother lost his leg, playing around, jumping around, I guess, and his leg was, no doctor to help him out, and he lost the leg. Today, he could have saved it. He was the brightest, I think, one of the brightest in the family. But his life consisted mostly of manual work, labor, and had an old prosthesis there, a artificial leg, wooden thing, that when mornings came, in the mornings, we had no fire in the house in the morning, at the nights. And my father, of course, was gone. And they said, who lights the fire this morning? It's your turn to light it. And that's the way, your turn to light it. I lit it yesterday morning, he said. And always Harry would say, he was the one with the prosthesis, Harry would say, don't forget to take my leg and warm it up before he could put it on. But he did remarkable with that leg. Had an old horse. He grew his own vegetables and so on and so forth, dragging that leg through the mud almost the way he was working. Tremendous. I could see him stand where the people were skating, and the tears came out of his eyes that he could not do that, because he just loved the sports. And he died at 39. I think it was a kidney of some kind of infection. And to get him to the hospital at the time, he had to travel overland, he had to travel by boat. And it took a long time. The doctor said, had he been here a few hours before, we could have saved him. But it was just too late. That was the circumstance. Now my brother, we started talking. My father, I presume it was he was cutting wood away from for the winter. When he got pneumonia, there's no cure for pneumonia then, and he insisted on coming home. And they said, you can't go home. He would never make it to go home. How long he kept this up, I don't know. Finally, my brother took the train. The train was a good 12 hours away, and went in there and brought him home. And I remember seeing this gaunt, bearded man on a Christmas Eve. He came home, saw us all. The next morning, Christmas morning, he died after greeting the rest of us who left. He hung on. The doctor was amazed that he hung on so long, but he wanted to come home. And I remember the minister coming, because the minister was really the doctor, the lawyer, everything, you know. And he came in, and I was there. I remember went upstairs, so opened the eyelids, the eyes, felt the pulse, his heart, the heart. He's dead, he said. I was probably 11 or 12 years old. And then the casket was always kept at the house, so we had no place to put them about 3 days, so on. And always a church service for him. Now, I had a brother die. Well, my brother that we're telling you, Sidney, was the one who was the seventh son of the seventh son. And he died 3 or 4 years ago. And prior to his dying, his only daughter died of cancer. And but she had a better chance. She was in many clinics, Toronto and elsewhere, but she passed on. He was, prior to the lumber, he was a fisherman for years on the Labrador coast.
And your mom, what did she do?
She did everything. If there's any gardens, I presume she did it. The women did the gardens. She had bare floors, which she scrubbed. She baked all the breads. I remember one time I said, that sounds like fun. Let's try it. Let me try it. Then after that, she wanted me to do it. It wasn't fun anymore. She carried with her a great deal of pain, a great deal of sorrow. Marvelous how they held up. They held up because they felt better things awaited them in the by and by, that were in God's hands. And you know, they couldn't give you, there wasn't much of a rationale in a sense. God's in charge. And if these things happen, it's His will. Something like that, you know. And so they endured. But for some it must have been, I often thought that when you're married, you're married. Back there. And some of them must have been some unhealthy marriages, but still they've carried on. This is my lot. And I went to public school, and there was always something turning in me that I should become a pastor, a minister. Many reasons probably I did, but when I graduated from public school, I went immediately to the placement of probationaries. And these are young men who wanted to go into the ministry, but they had to go out on a trial basis. And I was given a community in the northern part of Newfoundland, close to Labrador. And my task was to teach school 5 days a week, about which I knew little. I came there with a textbook in my hand to teach school, and the Bible in my hand to preach, to take care of services on Sunday, and whatever activities. And it was a momentous task, but I was filled with the thought that I could scale mountains. Do it. And it was a good time, it was a rough time. I was confronted with problems I couldn't solve.
Give me an example.
Well, there's a child looking you in the face. Maybe he's in the late grades, asking questions. I couldn't answer his questions. I only praying that somehow this kid with this brain would find a way out of this fishing village, one way or another. See, there was no money for him, and this village was very isolated. We traveled in the winter by dog team, and in the summer by boat. So you were really cut off. No doctors. Maybe there's somebody there who knows, who picked up some thoughts of medicine and how to deal with you if you had certain things wrong. But we were left to the forces, to live or die. So I managed. I was given a, I don't know, A or B or whatever it was, but I was given another assignment. This time it was 5 churches, still on a probationary basis, that I preached in. I preached at least 3 times going from place to place by boat, and in the wintertime we did it by best we could, skating or snowshoes, and so on. One of the things that stand out there for me in this thing, I was always interested, always in having an ecumenical spirit and move out, because I grew up in a very segregated community. My community are all Protestants. If you want to see a Catholic, you've got to go over to the other community. And there was always some fighting going on, and it troubled me greatly, because I would be hearing on Sundays, you should love one another. And I couldn't. It was my test, I think, either to quit it all or to find out, is it possible? This is it, that we should love one another. And that was the route. And that was the route that I took. So one of the things I did in that community, the Salvation Army was next door to me. And we were supposed to have some kind of evangelistic services during Easter time. And the Salvation Army was doing the same thing. And I thought, that doesn't make much sense. These are all the same people here. People who are in Salvation Army may not be approving of something what happened in the United Church. They went over there. That we're all interrelated. So I went over and spoke to him, a young novice that I was. I said, why don't we do it together? And he looked at me as much to say, son, you don't know what you're talking about. He's a much older man, more experienced. And I kept it up. He said, maybe we can do that. I said, why don't you bring whatever you got, whatever instruments you got to your church. Well, I can bring some, he said, but I certainly wouldn't bring the drums. And that brought the community together. We filled the churches, we filled the Salvation Army, and then the other parishes that I had were just waiting for me to carry on this evangelistic thing. But it gave me some insight, what can happen when we meet together. But after we do meet together, then we need to know each other well enough so that we don't keep on competing, but that we keep uniting and working together for the good of one another, for the good of the community, for the good of the world. See? So I was approved after 2 years. And then I was given the choice of college and university and seminary. So I took Montreal, United Theological College, and the university, with $70 in my pocket. That's all I had, and the faith that I could make it. The bursar looked at my grades and looked at the subject matter that I'd taken. He said, look, you don't look like you're really ready for McGill University. I said, does that mean you're not going to take me? Because I was registered. With the seminary. They were going to pay some of my way. No, he said, we will take you. But about 2 years from here, he said, when you find you're not going to make it, you're sorry that you didn't take my advice. So there was substance to his advice, but I made it. And these were tough times for me. I had no money. The little work you got brought you to pittance. And one summer I was at a job leading out dogs, exercising them, taking them up, and this was taking them Mount Royal in Montreal, had to do. And this particular day, my dog was a good-sized dog, came up and here a lady came over the horizon with another dog, and boom, we lost the dogs. And when my dog came back to me, it was full of burrs. And I tried to pull them off, but I couldn't do it. Took them back to the lady. Why didn't you take them off, she said. I said, I took more off than what she got on there. It's just too much. She said, don't come back again. And my other job was 6 o'clock in the morning and 6 o'clock at night, going down and firing the furnace of a doctor. And I think I was getting about $10 a week. And then there was always somebody waiting back at the dorm asking, hey, could you lend me $5? You lend them $5, you never saw it again. So that went on, and then I met my wife, Christine, and later on we were married. And something should go in here. Is the brother ahead of me is now gone, was the seventh son of the seventh son. Not many people know that now. That is gone, relegated back to history. The seventh son of the seventh son is known as a healer. And I noticed that growing up that people would come and see him and say, put your hand on my shoulder, put your hand on my head. And it worked. That's what they say. I have a nephew, and we were talking about this a little while ago, and he thinks that I'm skeptical about it, you see. Don't you ever do that, he said. I came over there, it's years ago, my tooth was killing me, and your brother put his hand and it went away. See? So one summer we were idling into the woods, and I was kidding him. I said, you're going to be a doctor. I said, you're designated to be a doctor. God says you're going to be a doctor. You got this gift. He wouldn't say anything. He kept this all to himself. He never told you that he had this power. I said, well, let's test it. Old legend had it that a worm would die in his hand. See? So I started digging over the rocks and found the worm, put the worm in his hand, and it died. It lost its color. Well, nobody would believe that because, and we didn't go on looking for more worms. But I was sitting one Sunday up here in Colebrook to a newscast coming over from Canada, a religious newscast. And this young man in Ireland was the seventh son of the seventh son. And people were coming everywhere to have him touch them. There was a lady there who had been making her third trip over there, see? And somebody was interviewing him and said, how much money do you make? He said, well, I don't know that. My brothers look after me. And so on. And he said, how do you know you got this? He said, a worm will die in my hand. Now, that was 40 years since. And so I called out and said, come in here. I'm justified or something like this. And he's verifying what I'm saying. And I stopped at the Indian reservation 2 years ago in Canada. I said, I don't have anything to buy, but do you know anything about the seventh son of the seventh son? Of course. They said, we have one here, and we call him Seven. He heals? He does. And when my brother died, I saw him a little while before he died. He died of cancer. And he said something I never expected him to hear because we were away for years. He said, I don't have that power anymore. See? And this is remarkable. This is a remarkable thing. I always felt that there was something different about this man. He wouldn't tell you that he had this power, but he was different. And this, I don't know where you could go and make a study of that, because we don't have that anymore. And one could speculate, see, the healing power of Jesus. And the other thing, it was something not only spiritually derived, genetically, that is said here. But he was different. He was different in his relationships with others. He had a code, a morality code. He didn't frequent the church very often. And I somehow had the feeling, he didn't say this, see, that you slow me up when I go to church. You reduce me when I go to church. You segregate me when I go to church. I don't know. But he was different. I think anybody who knew him that he was a very helpful person, extremely helpful, going on his way. But there was a lot that he kept to himself. All that I can put it is he was a different person.
But spiritual, you said. You thought, in a way.
It was a spirituality about him, I think, but he didn't broadcast it. I think you got it as he worked among you. He had a code. He expected you, particularly in the woods. I remember he told me somebody came in, had long hair. He didn't mind that. But he said, the work we're in here with saws and all the business, that's not safe. You must take that off. See? And that was all. The rules he went by. And extremely devoted to his wife. I think he was a slave to her. She was the lady, you know, the one that didn't have all the advantages, but still had a great brain. And this was the sad part, I thought, of where I grew up. There were so many kids that were bright kids, but never had the money, and never had others pushing them, or never had, just dared to take that leap of faith. I said, I'm going to go. I'm going to jump in the water. I'm going. And that was the way I said. I didn't know what was unfolding before me. When I'd go back to a situation in my life, I think was a determining situation in my life. When I arrived to be charged of these five outposts, I was also given a letter that I was a member of the school board. And I didn't know what in the world the school board was all about. I heard about it, and I don't remember we fought it when I was in school. And when I arrived at my dwelling place, there were 3 men there from the school board, and said, the Salvation Army, we've been teaching the Salvation Army children because the Salvation Army teacher is not qualified to teach the upper grades. And they've been coming over to us. But we're not getting their money, which has been allocated through the government. We want you now to tell them they can't come anymore. Now, I didn't know what the school board had asked me that. It was like I was crushed. I thought, I can't deal with that. And that night I never took my clothes out. I said, there's a wall there I cannot rise over, a fog I cannot penetrate. In a sense, I was dumbfounded. I just stood up and said, when that boat comes in the morning, I'm going to get aboard. Get out of here. And this is what was going through my mind. About 5 o'clock in the morning, I heard the whistle, the boat was coming. I said, I have 30 minutes now to get to that boat. When I hear that whistle, 30 minutes, I get there. But I was immobile. I said, immobile. And then it went again. There it is. I'm in the desert. I'm stuck. What am I stuck? But somehow the scales fell off. I was free, but I didn't know what freedom was all about. I didn't know what the action, what it was going to be. It was settled by the board. I didn't have to do it. And the lesson I learned at that one is sometimes there's nothing you can do about it, but you can wait. I thought about the old story of Jacob and his brothers. Who are you? He says. Tell me your name. Jacob. And somewhere the scales fell off as he went on to meet his brother Esau. See? But that was a determining place in my life. I think something was telling me if you went, you were letting, see, what I don't know is it making a difference to us, but what distinguishes where I grew up and what distinguishes here, we were under the canopy of God. If you sinned, you didn't sin against the other one. If I put, let's say, I ran out on my mother. I mean, you know, she's good. Here's the minute. I let her down. Some pastor of the church let them down. Down. The bigger one, it's God you let down. You always had a sense that the sin you're committing ultimately is against God. That doesn't override us anymore. And so, on a Sunday morning, we can't get a bit of here, can't get a bit of here, because we got so many things going on Sunday morning, we can't distinguish from the spiritual from the non-spiritual somehow, or what is essential in building the kind of life I want to build. Is it the things I amass, or is it the kind of spirituality that I get as I, you know. This thing with Danny, I don't know what it is. See, Danny comes from Ireland, strong Catholicism. I come from Newfoundland, strong, biased Protestantism, pulling me apart. I said, how am I going to get this together? And when I met Danny, he had a brogue, he had idioms, he had a kind of generic expression that I could call, that's my brother. In spite, you know, we are under different orders. We were basically down, I felt, beyond the orders or above the orders. The structure of our life. There's something hidden up. Maybe it's like you hit your first love or something, I don't know. It was that. I understand him. And I think he understands me. And we don't have to talk about it. I think we trust each other. I look at that paper there, you know, with that picture you took of us. It's genuine. And furthermore, he has an interest in people that I have an interest in. You heard him say, you know, about the boys. These good boys, he said. On weekends, they're lost weekends. They're lost weekends. But that's, yeah, he saw beyond the lost weekends who they were. I mean, that is the Jesus part of life, of spirituality. He looked beyond, you know, what he could whip them down with or something like that, the unkind or, you know, different things, to the basics of people. It didn't do it structurally. It didn't do it denominationally, although every denomination's got it up. And you got some places that we had to remind ourselves that we are Christians and we belong to Christ. All of them bring that in. Church is one foundation, it's Jesus Christ our Lord, and so on. And we go together, have our meetings. But then we set apart, and then we carry on within the structures. And we don't pay the attention to what brought the structures into being in the first place. What was this experience? And we get and we keep elevating the system. When we miss what brought the system into being, the experience of a relationship with God that Jesus had. And his relationship was with people of all kinds of people. Simple, basic thing. And I've had a number of experiences, but when I was in Penacook, one of the things that Chris did, we had here meals, not Meals on Wheels, but I think we were before the Meals on Wheels. And we had our Catholic brothers and non-Catholics and so on come in and participate in these meals. And I remember one man who had known each other for 50 years said, you know, I never stepped inside this church before. First time. We've gone to school together, we've done this together, we haven't done this together. And Danny, at my 50th anniversary, came over to the church and read this lovely statement. That kind of stuff did more than all of our preaching from pulpits and all the rest of the thing. Is the basic when they seem to do that. And Father Donnelly and I got over together quite a bit. And I went to visit him when he was sick in the hospital, shook his hands, walked away, and he said, Oliver, come back. Give me your blessing. See, and I looked back at the time and I could hear my people say, Jones, who came off the train? We were the terminus of the railroad. Who came off the train? They mixed again? Was there a fight? Was there so I've seen somehow, I mean, the road, the road to come together is got to go behind the codes and the doctrines and so on. These are good to have when you don't have anything to lead you by. You need that. You need that. But that is to lead you to what's behind it all. See, and it's a strange thing. I will look for a cup of tea at Danny's house probably before I go anywhere else. And yet we came from diverse roads. And yet when we met, I said, where have you been all your life?
All right, I know we're jumping ahead, but why don't you tell me about the first time you met him?
I don't know. I think when he came into town, I don't know, did he come into town with a car? That's something. Him come with a car. He had a child?
3, I think.
Well, we were matching up children anyway. That was this is the first thing, the reflection, how many children he had. And he lived over the house up there. And I think of him putting pieces together and make the whole, you know. And it seemed to me he had to get the right pieces to go together. He was building his life methodically, you know. He's not going to rush into this. He had the vision ahead of himself, but anyway, he had to go piece by piece. Well, if we get together now and we talk about the guys that gave us the most trouble. Well, we did a lot of talking about the Martin boys. See.
What kind of trouble did they cause?
Well, one of them came to me, and we came at the Martin boys. One of the boys came to me. I don't know how he must have told you a story how they got up here anyway. The Martin boys. Want to get married? I said, how many children do you want? 6. How many boys? No boys. Well, he had 6 children. The 7th one was a girl. See, I think there's a story when we used to talk about some of the boys that we were dealing with and working with. And there's one boy, a fellow who Ernie, let's call him Ernie. Ernie had problems with alcohol. A great guy, great worker, tree man, I think. But when he got drunk, he had to go and take on the police. He had to drive a car for which he wasn't licensed, and that kept repeating and repeating and repeating. And one day I got a call from a judge, I think it was over in Hillsborough somewhere. He said, we got Ernie here. Ernie shouldn't go to jail. He said, that's no place for him. But what are we going to do? Could we, what was the word he used? Could he be paroled in your presence for a year? I said, okay, what does it do? He's got to show up every month and so on and so forth. And so Ernie was paroled in my presence for a year. Behaved. One day he came to me and said, look, there's a couple working for me, and they got to get married. She's going to have a baby. I said, Ernie, I don't do it that way. He said, well, if she don't get married, she's going to have it pretty soon. So finally we just said, okay, all right. Then when I saw them, where are you going to be married? Oh, up in the backwoods. I said, what? Yeah. So I thought I had the directions, and I set out for the backwoods. Came up to what was like a graveyard. 2 policemen there. And I said, what are you doing? He said, there's a wedding here. And you? Well, we're just coming. See, for the wedding. Oh. And we waited. The mosquitoes were getting pretty thick. And I said, I think I'm going to leave. If they want to get married, bring them down to the church. Then the bride came along. Oh, she said, it's not here. It's further up. Well, we went further up, and Ernie, the groom was a little late getting there. I think he was in jail or something. They were in jail the night before because they were rousing up. I said, you've been drinking? He said, no. I said, well, I can't accept that. So I called a couple over. I said, no, listen, we have an affidavit here. To the best of your knowledge, this fellow's not drunk, and that's not drinking, right? Okay, because I've known people to get annulled because Okay, I don't know what I did with the with the affidavit or whatever. And so when I got there, there were little kegs of beer, and they'd been drinking for an hour, and they were having a pretty good time. The mosquitoes were still here, and so on. And I said, "Will you please put your glasses down?" I said, "It took me a while to get up here, and I'm frustrated, etc., etc., etc. Will you just be quiet and listen to the sounds of nature?" And all of a sudden, every bird in the land started singing and singing and singing and singing. We let it go on. There was not a sound there. And I said, "Well, we have to carry on with the wedding." And when it was over, I said, "No, you go back to your festivities." It looked like they didn't want to take the glasses up anymore. There was, I believe they all got a real touch of nature and the feelings of nature in there. That wedding comes back to me. I don't know what the outcome of it all, but I thought that was a great ministry for us all of us at that place. That was one of the ones and a number of years ago, not a number of years, a few years ago, I was marrying one in my family, granddaughter, and they wanted to go up Mount Kearsarge, and here came the motorcyclists. So what have I got today? Oh, dressed up as this. I even thought about Hell's Angels. And they wanted to face the horizon. Jeez, I said, this is bit. All right, let's all take a look out there. If we're going to look beyond the landscape, we look up on the hills, the far horizon. Take a look. And remember, when I lift up my eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help, and so on. And cold morning. When it was over, this big bruiser came along, and Rosie's son, I guess it was Rosie's son, he says, "Ernie isn't drinking anymore." That was the message. Ernie was a good guy. I think Danny, that's part of his life, but you also better be straight with him too. We had the 50th anniversary of our church, and I was here instrumental in bringing two denominations together, or two local churches together. And Danny had been so impressed, I guess, with the activities and with the ecumenical feelings that had been developing, that he came, and it'd be nice for that letter, if he's got that letter somewhere, been incorporated in that letter, because that was a real touching, moving letter that he wrote there, and you picture that where he came, out of Ireland as I came out of Newfoundland, where it was vicious. It was vicious, what they used to say of one another.
How about the store? What do you remember about the store?
No, I remember he was, if people were in trouble, he was very free with that. If people, for instance, I don't know this, but I got a feeling, if they were late in, taking advantage of him, they soon find out. They soon find out who was coming out on top of that. I know you're reaching for something that, because in my own experience with him as a correspondence we had, the telephones we had, and it's like an ongoing friendship. And I don't,
Okay.
I see him, I see Danny in the larger picture, rather than picking out little things here, except of course, we get down to the boys, called the Martin boys, because that occupied all his life, right? I mean, that overshadowed a good many things.